I mean, back to the conversation with David Carr. It brings up a question. This is something that somebody who watches the show asked me was players that should have been better but got hurt. Players that could have been Hall of Famers had they not got hurt.
That's a long list.
And I think David Carr is on that list. I think David Carr is better than Derek ever was.
I think you're right.
And I think if he goes to a different franchise or is allowed to sit behind a better offensive line, he doesn't get his confidence shaken. And I think he has a nice long career.
Well, what happens if Rodgers goes to San Francisco and Alex Smith comes to Green Bay?
It could
With
be different. I mean, Alex Smith was never going to be the quarterback that Aaron
no,
Rodgers was. But if Aaron Rodgers doesn't sit, Aaron Rodgers had a very high throwing motion. So if he's put in to start right away, does his confidence get rocked versus sitting behind Favre and learning what he learned?
and listening to Bart Starr, which he did.
Right.
And you
But
can see so much of Favre in Rodgers, just the way he plays the game. But you look at guys that have gotten injured, like David Carr, and in football, this guy should have been a Hall of Famer in two sports. Bo Jackson,
Bo
the
Jackson,
single greatest athlete I've ever seen, and he was a dominant football player. He would have taken the Raiders, I think, to the playoffs and maybe the Super Bowl. You never know what happens when you get in there. But he could have been a Hall of Famer in two sports had it not been for that hip injury.
right.
And he got hurt because he was so strong.
Yeah, and it was a fluke tackle.
It was.
It just was he got hit in the right spot at the right angle at the right time and
Well, the guy held on, and he was so strong. He was just trying to pull it, and he ended up pulling his hip out.
yep. At
And
that time the medical advancements weren't there to fix it. It was a career-ending injury.
well,
And he
and
tried to make a comeback in baseball, but he was
he
never the
did.
same player.
No, you're never going to be the same player. But you talk about that. I look at guys like Joe Namath, who
We talked
the
about him.
the surgeons were butchers back then. No offense to any doctors that are out there, but I mean, back then, knee surgery, you got opened up from top to bottom and
Yeah,
you went in and fixed it. Now they do most things with a scope.
right.
Namath would have been a different player had the technology been different.
Yeah, we talked about that. Namath before Warner came into play, he was probably the least impressive quarterback in the Hall of Fame to no fault of his own. He's definitely a Hall of Fame player.
Yeah,
But his knees got so bad in the end. I look at Sterling Sharp,
yeah.
who should be in the Hall of Fame.
I think he should be in there now, regardless of what
I do
happened.
too. I mean, in the 9 years he played, he was the most dominant wide receiver in the league.
He was,
But he
and
played in a small market on a bad team.
well, on a bad team at that time, but he was starting to come into his own. He would have been on that Packers Super Bowl team had he
Yep.
kept playing. People have always said, well, Favre got better after Sharp retired. No.
It's like saying Stafford got better after Sharp retired or after
Calvin,
Calvin Johnson retired. Nobody gets better when the best receiver in the game leaves.
right. And I always thought it was a goofy argument. Their argument was, well, he looked at other players. Well, he looked at Sharp because Sharp always got open. I
Right.
mean, it had nothing to do
why
with
do
who
you
else.
why do you throw it to anybody else when somebody's triple covered and still catches the ball?
Yes, and I think that did hurt Rodgers this year with Devontae Adams. But um, there are other guys. Earl Campbell got hurt.
Yeah, he got hurt
He
early in his
was
career.
as down. He was the single most dominant running back I've ever seen.
Still a Hall of Famer. There's a running back though who I think would have been a Hall of Famer, and he's a Detroit Lion
Billy
in
Sims,
Billy Sims. I mean, a Heisman Trophy winner,
right?
uh, and put up 5,000 yards in his first 4 years in the NFL, and then got hurt.
It's interesting because he came. The Lions could have went either back-to-back Hall of Famers with Billy Sims
They're
to
never in a
Barry
position
Sanders,
to draft Barry Sanders.
and that's just it. He may have went to win another team. Um,
I mean, Sims was carrying that team.
Billy Sims was an amazing running back.
Yeah,
He wasn't like Barry Sanders. He was more of a power runner,
right.
but uh, he was a force he was on Detroit.
He
Uh,
he was heading towards Emmett Smith size numbers.
I I think you're right. I think he would have been a Hall of Famer. Sadly, he was still playing for Detroit, and Detroit was not going to be a playoff team even with him on the team.
No, they weren't, but I think he gets forgotten in history because of that, and it's too bad because Detroit fans remember him for what he was, and he was a really solid player.
Well, and he gets forgotten too because Barry Sanders wore the same number.
Yeah,
They're both number 20. And I think Detroit has retired the number for both players at this point. I could be wrong about that, but I think they did.
I don't know on that one.
I
You
don't
guys
know.
let us know in the comments below on that. There is two players and one that I'm still sour about because
God.
he should have been better. But Kerry Wood was definitely one of those guys.
He refused to change his motion.
It was his motion that got him hurt. I understand that. You know, he was a dominant pitcher in his time, but if he stays healthy, I mean, nobody touched Kerry Wood.
No, he was every bit as dominant as Nolan Ryan and Roger Clemens was. I
Yep.
mean, he was another one of those Texas kids who just had a cannon for an arm, huge
And
12-6
could make.
breaking
I was gonna
ball.
say, I mean, his curveball was impressive.
It was incredible, but he got hurt because of the way he threw.
He did, and he never came back. Went into a reliever
And had a nice
role
career.
later in his career, and yeah, he came back to the Cubs for a little bit. Was our closer for a little bit, and but Mark Pryor.
Go on, Tucker. You mentioned this earlier. Go on, because I know where this is
Mark
going to
Pryor
go.
should have been a Hall of Famer,
It
and
could have been.
Dusty Baker ruined Mark Pryor. I can't stand Dusty Baker.
Dusty, if
Baker
you're
is the.
watching, and I hope you are.
You can come talk to me. I'm not your biggest fan.
Look, this all comes back to what's sadly known as the Bartman game.
It is, and that game was Dusty Baker's fault, and he broke Mark Pryor in the process.
He did. He was
Moises
never
Alou overreacts to the Bartman situation. Would he
correct.
have caught the ball? Yes. Should Bartman have reached out? No. Was it Bartman's fault? Not
No.
even close. Moises Alou overreacted. He acted like a 5-year-old and threw his glove on the ground. So now everybody's paying attention to it. And then Alex Gonzalez, sorry, who was one of the best shortstops in the game that year, makes an untimely error. And then you have a young pitcher in Mark Pryor who is visibly shaken,
Yes.
and Baker just leaves him in there to
Look,
rot.
it was a young team that should have been good for a long time, but
Yeah.
Dusty Baker at that point needed to go out there,
You had
walk right out to left field,
Yeah.
and tell Lou to stop it, bring
Yes.
everybody together, probably pull Pryor out. But even if he doesn't, if he just comes in and goes, "Look, guys, we're still in great shape. Just
You
relax."
had Kerry Wood in the bullpen that
hmm
night. You specifically pulled him earlier in the game down in Miami. So you had him in the bullpen ready for game 6 to come home. And Mark Pryor's visibly shaken. He's a young player. You have Kerry Wood in the pen, and you don't even come out and talk to him. He lets up 8 runs, comes back the next year, is clearly
Right.
overthrowing the ball, and throws out his shoulder because of it halfway through the season. And unfortunately, he never
He's
comes back. But he's one guy I look at that he had everything.
he was a what should have been.
He had everything. Look at Brian Taylor, the old Yankees prospect, never even
Sure.
made it to the majors, gets in a bar fight and decides to punch somebody with his left hand.
Well, I'll give you another one. Uh, and this guy goes back, but I remember him as a kid. Tony Kaligniero played for the Boston Red Sox, was on the improbable Red Sox team that went to the World Series, but in August, he took one right in the eye.
Yeah. Well, they
Yeah.
have that Sports Illustrated cover of him.
Right, right. And, he was such a competitor. He wanted to come back and be a pitcher, but he was just never the same. He was never going to be a batter again because it was an ugly, ugly
Well, I think Jason
shot.
Hayward's a lot that way too. You know, if people
Sure.
forget, Jason Hayward took one right to the eye, which is why they have the why he wears.
He'll go down being remembered for the face guard that he
Yeah, he
invented.
and Javi Baez
Right.
were the first ones to wear it, and people forget that. Like, how does that not shake you getting hit in the eye with a ball?
Oh, it, the fact that Caligniero wanted to come back and be a pitcher
Yeah.
is just mind blowing to me. And he did fight back through it, but he was never going to be the same after that, um, which is sad. And there was another guy. This guy I remember because I was in high school when he played. There was a guy named Gojo or Super Joe Charbonneau. This was a kid who was rookie of the year, had 40 home runs, I believe, hit about uh, just under 300, and then got hurt and was never the same. He hurt his back sliding in headfirst into second base, um, and he was always a star. They did a song about him in Cleveland.
Really?
Yeah, I wish I could find. I should have given you the link so we could have played it. It was a great song. No, it wasn't. It was a novelty song about Super Joe Charbonneau.
Can't be as good as Brett Favre as an alien.
No, well, yeah, no, it's not that good. Anyways, he was another guy that injury cut what should have been, everybody thought might have been another Hall of Fame career.
Yeah. You know one guy that is in the Hall of Fame that I still think got hurt by injuries, Grant Hill on the basketball side. Because Grant Hill's a Hall of Famer, which he should be. But I mean, he couldn't stay healthy.
No, he couldn't. And along those lines, Bill Walton's another one.
Yeah.
Walton was a dominant. He came in after Kareem at UCLA.
Yep.
He was dominant, but he had such a bad foot. He led Portland to the NBA championship.
Yeah.
Uh,
Speaking of Portland, Greg Oden.
right. Oh, that guy I feel so bad
Oh,
for.
I do too. I mean, that guy was putting up 20 points a game, but just couldn't stay healthy. Yao Ming, another one of the
Yeah.
big guys. Sam Bowie, another Portland Trailblazer. I mean, the poor Trailblazers and their big
Well,
guys.
didn't Oden and Sam Bowie both have the microfracture in the knee?
They
And
did, and
and
there's no fixing it.
no, there's
With
still not
this,
a good fix for it.
with the size those guys are, Greg Oden had a smaller frame. He filled out, but I mean, what a nice guy too.
Yeah.
Such a nice guy for that to happen to. I loved watching Greg Oden at Ohio State, and it was,
Ralph Sampson was another one. He played at Virginia in college.
yep,
Never won the NCAA tournament, but then he went to Houston, and they thought, okay, you're finally going to be over the top. But then again, his knees just couldn't hold up, and that
yeah,
happens to a lot of the bigger guys.
it
That's why I was
does.
always amazed at Kareem and Wilt, how
Yeah,
long they held up.
Paul George, the fact that he came back
True.
after he had one of the most disgusting injuries
Yeah.
anybody's ever seen.
Oh, well, Joe Theismann, he never did come back after that injury.
No,
Everybody remembers watching that. I remember some tennis players. Uh, Tracy Austin won the U.S. Open, but then hurt her back and she was done.
all
And
it
then,
takes.
what's that?
All it
Yeah,
takes.
it is. It was all it takes. I mean, tennis, you needed your back. I don't know that her game was very much based on Chris Everett's and a wood racket.
Yeah,
But then fast forwarding tennis years or 10 years, the most
or
uh,
tennis years. I
tennis,
mean,
either one, the most egregious attack in almost any sports that I can remember is the guy jumping out of the stands and going and stabbing Monica Seles.
yes.
People said, "Well, she wasn't able to come back." Well, how could she ever step on a court again after that? I just can't
Well, the fact
imagine.
that Nancy Kerrigan came back onto an
Right.
ice rink after her knees were taken out and beat Tanya Harding, so go Nancy Kerrigan.
Absolutely. She was, in fact, and still remains, I think, America's sweetheart.
Yeah, I remember I hurt my knee playing tennis, and it was hard to come back onto a court and stop the way that I had before.
That hurt you for a long time. I mean, we
It
go.
did. It gets into your brain, and I think that's what happens to a lot of these injuries for some guys. But I think, I mean, you look at somebody like Greg Oden. I mean, I think he had the passion to come back. He just,
And
it was an injury you could do nothing about, and I think that's a lot of these guys on here. They're just injuries that
and that
they are
brings
what
me
they are.
to one who did come back, and that was Ben Hogan in a horrific car
Yeah,
accident. Came back and won three in 1 year. Had to take ice baths after every round in order because they were walking just like they do now. But
right.
I think they played 36 holes for the U.S. Open then
Yep.
on the final day, and he came back and won three in 1 year. It's probably the greatest comeback of all time. And maybe Tiger will match that. We don't know if he'll be able to come back after his
Yeah,
accident.
people forget with Tiger, like, because all the personal stuff he went through and the addiction and all of that, and good for him for coming back out of
Yeah,
that. But he destroyed his knee in 2008.
he won the
Like he
U.S. Open
tore
on a broken leg.
torn ACL.
Was that what it was?
And then he had all those back injuries. He definitely bulked up, and he had all those back injuries. And again, people forget he was pretty hurt for all
He-
those years. The fact with his back injuries that he was out even swinging a golf club is amazing. And he came back and won a major, and now with the car accident he was just in now.
I hope he comes back. He came back for the father-son event and looked good, but still there were a couple
I mean,
moments
that
where,
guy's lucky he still has a leg.
yeah, he is. And there was talk about it. If it wouldn't have been Tiger, I think he would have lost his leg. But you look at, and just to close this off, you look at sports like tennis and golf. There's always been the conversation, you want to build long muscles. You don't want to put on a lot of weight and a lot of extra muscle. And I think Tiger's talked about that. He got too big
He
for
did.
a while,
He did.
especially around the chest. You need longer, lean muscles that can react. I know
He did.
when
And
I played,
science is getting better.
it's getting better, but
It's
still, when I played tennis, my muscles I worked on the long muscles. I didn't want to bulk up a lot.
no. And we've seen these happen before. We're going to see some more players, where injury's just going to take
We
them off the top of the mountain for sure.
we've touched on just a few of the athletes who have had their careers shortened. I want to hear in the comments if there's any who we've missed, and I'm sure we've missed a
I'm sure
ton.
we have